Our main story tonight concerns healthcare, the thing that ER was originally about before, in later seasons, it really became more about scenes like this. Wow. Obviously, a lot going on there, not least of which, if you're not familiar with the ER-niverse, this guy was already living with one arm because he lost the other, and this is true, in a different helicopter accident. And you know what they say? Hit me with a helicopter once, shame on you. Hit me with a helicopter twice, you must be in some late-stage post-Clooney ER seasons. Specifically, tonight's story is about the healthcare currently offered in jails and prisons. That's right. After 5 long months, we're welcoming you back with a story about prisoner healthcare, because deep down, this is who we are. And I know that for some, the very concept of incarcerated people getting medical care is somehow offensive, as you can tell from the fact that for years, the subject's been framed on TV like this.
Spokane County taxpayers are paying the bill for alleged killers, rapists, and child molesters to see doctors, dentists, and specialists.
Have you ever seen a meth user's teeth? It's called meth mouth, and it is awful.
KOAT anchor Todd Kurtz shows you how all of that decay is costing you money as jails and prisons are forced to fix those teeth.
There is a place where we are all guaranteed health care by law. It's called jail.
And criminals know their way around the system and look for chances to get treatment on the taxpayer's dime.
OK, it is just wild to point out that the only place Americans are guaranteed health care is jail, and somehow make it seem like the problem is prisoners and not our deeply broken system. Yeah, apparently the only place you can get free dental is jail. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Exactly. Fuck that guy and his teeth. And putting aside the fact that not everyone who's incarcerated is even guilty, it's worth pointing out that according to a recent study, 100% of prisoners are actually people. I mean, like human beings people. Like the kind that you are. They have hopes and souls and farts and brains. And if that isn't enough, you should know the Constitution requires that we provide adequate health care to anyone behind bars. In 1976, the Supreme Court ruled that denying medical treatment to prisoners constitutes cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the 8th Amendment. Yet despite all of that, the quality of care prisoners receive is abysmal. Investigations in state after state have found it to be woefully deficient, and a lawsuit against Arizona a while back made some horrifying allegations.
It alleges that prisoners are at, quote, substantial risk of pain, amputation, disfigurement, and death. It cites examples of prisoners being told to pray to be cured or drink energy shakes to treat cancer symptoms.
OK, that is both terrible advice and also not even close to being true. If energy drinks could treat cancer symptoms, you'd have heard about it. Red Bull would mention it in all of their ads instead of their current marketing copy, which is, Red Bull, there's nothing we can do about the taste, but let's be honest, you're 22 and hungover and just need something to get you through your shift at Red Lobster, and you're still a few years away from having cocaine money, so just shut up and put this poison in you. And the thing is, the consequences of poor care are only going to get more dire, given our rapidly ageing prison population. From 1999 to 2015, the number of people 55 or older in prison increased by 264%. And why are we confining so many elderly people in prisons when we should clearly be putting them where they belong, on the Golden Bachelor, taking full advantage of menopause and fucking Raw? I presume that's what's happening on that show. So given all of this, tonight, let's take a look at prison healthcare. Who provides it, why it's so bad, and how we can improve it going forward. And let's start with the fact that at one point, states themselves provided medical care for their jails and prisons. Some still do, in fact, and in most places it's generally been pretty bad. That treat cancer with prayer and energy drink story is from when Arizona ran its own prison healthcare. But increasingly, states have started contracting care out to private companies. As of 2018, more than half of all US states hire private companies to provide at least some of their prison health care. And when it comes to our largest jails, that number is more than 60%, all of which explains why this is now a roughly $4 billion industry. And the sell companies make is that they can tailor care to the particular needs of the incarcerated, a population that can have high rates of substance abuse and mental illness, both of which do pose special challenges. Just listen to this promo for Advanced Correctional Healthcare, which serves facilities in 21 states, as it makes a very big promise.
The purpose of advanced correctional healthcare is to solve problems for our patients and clients and make their lives easier. In fact, our data indicates your detainees will be healthier in your jail than they are when they go to their own doctors.
Well, that definitely doesn't immediately seem like bullshit, does it? From the fact that she's citing our data to the fact that when you're Googling for best doctors near me, the top result is very rarely, have you tried your local jail? And unsurprisingly, the rosy picture that promo paints doesn't remotely live up to reality. Take this story from a Wisconsin jail that used that company's services.
6 months ago, 39-year-old Dante Wilson was in a Wisconsin jail for a child support violation. He complained of chest pains. The jail nurse concluded he had heartburn and gave him 2 Tums. Less than an hour later, Wilson asked for help again. Relax was the nurse's advice. Soon after, Wilson died of a heart attack. The nurse told a detective weeks later. The nurse was fired.
Good! She should have been. Because that is the single worst thing you can possibly say in response to someone dying of a heart attack because you screwed up. And while I'm sure that she was upset at losing her job, if I may share a quote that it seems there is simply no bad time for, shit fucking happens. And at this point, you will not be surprised to learn that in internal trainings, advanced correctional healthcare seem to spend an unnerving amount of time teaching its employees what constitutes the legal bare minimum of care. That rough draft Jennifer Garner wax figure once conducted a video seminar for staff titled "A Jail is Not a Health Spa." And just watch her explain the importance of avoiding deliberate indifference, basically not blatantly neglecting to treat prisoners, by using the weirdest possible example.
So how do we define deliberate indifference now? You must know of and disregard an excessive risk to inmate health or safety. Something which would cause the unnecessary and wanton or malicious infliction of pain. A few years back, there was an NBA player who was arrested for shooting a gun into the air 5 times outside of a strip club. That is criminal recklessness. That is consciously disregarding a substantial risk of harm. A stray bullet could have hit a stripper.
OK. That is definitely an example. Although, to be honest, it only really makes sense if she explains every legal concept like that. Abduction, a stripper gets kidnapped. Bankruptcy, a stripper stops stripping. Escrow, a stripper buys a house but enlists a third party to temporarily hold assets until the deal is finalised. Now, you should know, that woman was the company's senior counsel. And I'm happy to announce that she is no longer in that role, but that's only because she's now the president of the whole motherfucking company, y'all. The problem isn't just with this one company. It's with the whole industry. A review of 500 jails found those relying on the 5 leading contractors had higher death rates than facilities run by the government. And one of the key reasons companies so often deliver substandard care is that they are actively incentivised to due to how they are paid.
It's basically a fixed dollar amount contract. It's $16 and change per prisoner, and the contract assumes 34,000 prisoners. So it's basically, this is how much we're giving you. And the more money you spend on providing health care, the less profit you make.
Right, and that's a pretty obvious incentive to cut corners. If you give your babysitter $100 and say, whatever you don't spend on dinner, you can keep, don't be surprised if you come home to a very happy babysitter and a bunch of pissed-off kids eating top ramen. And that profit motive has led to some pretty outrageous policies. A recent court case against Wexford, one of the country's largest prisoner healthcare providers, revealed that for years it had had a de facto one good eye policy, as when a 69-year-old prisoner got cataracts in both eyes and wanted them fixed, the prison doctor told her that she'd have to make a choice. Which eye did she want fixed, the right one or the left one? Which is clearly an impossible question. It's like someone asking which property brother you'd like to kill. The only acceptable response to either question is both. Why are you making me choose? But to show just how dangerous these companies can be, let's just look at one state, Arizona. Back in 2009, it announced a plan to switch from state care to private providers. And the initial pitch was that this would be a cost-saving measure. But as this woman explained, something interesting happened fairly early on.
They put out a request for proposals, an RFP, and nobody bid for it because Nobody could do it for less than what the state was spending, because the state wasn't spending very much as it is. A couple of years later, the legislature came back and said, oh, we're going to amend that prior law. Remember where we said it has to be less? That's okay. It can cost more.
Oh, it can now, can it? Oh, so you demanded a competitive bid, and when no one responded, you just rolled over and gave up absolutely everything. It's a shrewd tactic from the famous book on negotiating, This Is Where I'm Softest, and Other Business Ideas by a Timid Puppy. But since then, it has been a nightmare, as Arizona has cycled through contractors. They started with Wexford, the one good eye people. But as things didn't improve, less than a year later, they switched to a company called Corizon. But almost immediately, heinous stories started emerging about the care that they were providing too, including one that we've actually shown you before on this show, about a woman who gave birth behind bars and whose C-section wound hadn't fully healed. And I'll let her mother pick up the story from there.
They decided she had been there long enough that she could go back to her yard, but it was still open a little bit. And so they decided that the best thing to do for this would be to pack it with kitchen sugar.
Sugar?
Sugar. And we're talking sugar that you get from, because they donate it from McDonald's, from Burger King. You know, they're standing there ripping open these little packs of sugar and filling that wound, packing it in with what's left. And
with sugar from a fast food restaurant?
Yes.
OK, let me be clear. I'm not a doctor. Although, if you put me in a lab coat, I do think I could get away with it for 2 to 6 weeks. I have an accent and I know how to say subdural hematoma. I'm basically halfway there already. But if I had to pick the worst possible thing for a person recovering from the trauma of childbirth, it'd probably be injecting McDonald's sugar straight into your bloodstream. And the state lawmaker who spearheaded the move to take Arizona's prison healthcare private, John Kavanaugh, didn't display a great deal of empathy when confronted with that story.
That sounds ridiculous. You know, prisoners have, 24/7 to think up allegations and write letters. I'm not saying that that some of them can't have a basis in fact, but you got to take them with a grain of salt, or in the case of the hospital, maybe a grain of sugar.
Oh, I get it. A joke. Prison Geppetto here is having some fun with words. And I'm sure that prisoner's sides were splitting. Less from laughter, though, and more from the open wound that, thanks to him, she had filled with fucking sugar. And that is just one of many stories of Corizon providing abysmal care, seemingly in order to cut costs. Not only were they repeatedly accused of refusing to pay specialists, causing hospitals to have to send emails like this one in which they literally beg for payment, but when a Corizon doctor was dealing with a prisoner who'd had multiple seizures and suggested sending him out for an exam, she was told that that was not going to happen, but that they'd order a helmet for him to protect his head instead. And while it is clearly not the most important thing here, we tracked that doctor down to ask if they ever got that helmet for him, and you'll never guess what the answer was unless your guess is no, in which case you're absolutely fucking right. And all of this led to horrific consequences. Like this man who had just 10 months left on his sentence for vehicle theft when he complained of back pain. 4 months later, he finally got x-rays done which showed signs of cancer. But even then, Corizon dragged its feet.
They wouldn't do an MRI. They kept denying an MRI.
In May, CT scans were ordered to see if Voki had cancer, but Corizon denied it. Finally, at the end of July 2013, a CT scan was performed. It confirmed Voki had cancer. Medical records show there was a lengthy delay in treating Voki.
And it was kidney cancer that could have been 95% survivable, and now they're saying that I can't survive it whatsoever.
Voki was granted medical parole so he can die surrounded by family.
That is a tragedy. Just 10 months left on his sentence, showing clear signs of cancer, and nothing was done. And again, he was in there for vehicle theft. The punishment for that is clearly not death, but under a system this cruel, it can turn out to be. And this was all part of a consistent pattern. The state's own records show that Corizon had delayed delivery of medical care 16,000 times in just one 8-month period. It got so bad, Arizona was actually forced to pay fines for the substandard care prisoners received, even as, mystifyingly, it continued to pay more than $2.5 million in performance bonuses to Corizon's executives. But eventually, enough was enough, and the state got rid of Corizon. The company, fun fact, has since declared bankruptcy, but rebranded as Yes Care, which is a bold name choice for that company. It's like Applebee's calling itself Won't Make You Poop Weird. To put it mildly, your name is a little misleading. Anyway, Arizona replaced Corizon with a company called Centurion, But the situation still didn't improve. In fact, last June, a judge ruled that for years, across multiple providers, the state had shown the most callous and inhumane indifference, saying no legitimate humane system would operate in this manner. Now, since that ruling, the state's contracted out to yet another new provider, this one called NAFCare, which itself is fighting accusations of forcibly inducing pregnant prisoners into labour against their will. And that is the thing here. In so many places, states end up just rotating among a small handful of awful providers. Prisons in Florida have gone from using Wexford to Corizon to Centurion. Alabama went from Corizon to Wexford to YesCare, which you'll remember, basically just Corizon rebranded. So states choose healthcare providers like old married couples choose sexual positions, by cycling through an extremely limited number of options, none of which really get the job done in a satisfying way. And the options can be so limited that even when public officials do try to do the right thing and demand action, they can often find themselves stuck. Take what happened in Forsyth County, North Carolina. It had a contract with a company called Correct Care Solutions to provide care in its jail. But after a series of calamities, including 2 men dying in the space of just 24 days, this county commissioner decided to vote against renewing their contract, and did so like this.
I can't vote to support Correct Care for any contract. You know, I don't care about $3 million, 3 years, or whatever. I wouldn't give Correct Care Solutions $3,000 for 3 days if I had it my way. So I can't support it.
Right, that's a pretty strong no from that man, and is completely justifiable, as his reluctance to renew Correct Care's contract was. As the county's deputy sheriff pointed out to him, there was a bit of a problem.
The only thing I will say, sir, is with regard to this Correct Care was the only vendor that bid.
It's true. There was no other option, so the whole vote was basically ceremonial. It'd be just as effective to hold a vote on the question, should it be summer now? Yes? Yes? Everyone votes yes? Well, bad news, everyone, it still isn't. And when you put all of this together, it's hard to escape 2 conclusions: that all the options currently on the table are bad, and that the reason they are allowed to be so bad is because of who this care is for. And I get that it can be difficult for some to care about issues affecting prisoners, and I also get that their health care may be especially difficult to rally around, as so many on the outside don't have health care themselves. I know all of this. But the fact remains, prisoners are people. 100% of them are, in fact. And there are some solutions here. I would argue that the bare minimum we should do is to stop outsourcing prison health care to private companies. As the director of the National Prison Project at the ACLU puts it, government-run prison health care is often appallingly deficient, but at least when a government is providing the service, there is some measure of oversight. And it should say something about just how bad things are, that what activists are pushing for here is the appallingly deficient option. And look, obviously, the problem is so much bigger than just shitty contractors. If the issue is that prisons are overwhelmed with too many patients to take care of, maybe there should be fewer people in there. If it's that prison population is getting older because of the incredibly long sentences that we've imposed on people, maybe we should consider releasing them. If it's that too many of them are dealing with addiction and mental health problems, maybe we should be examining whether prison is the best place to treat those conditions. Because the thing is, it is impossible to separate this issue from the much larger conversations about universal health care and prison abolition. Like so many stories that we cover, this one ends at the perpetual elephants in the room: that the US doesn't guarantee any of its citizens the dignity of good health care, and it puts too many of its people in cages. Cages where many will needlessly die. And you can take that with all the grains of sugar in the world, but it should still be absolutely impossible for you to swallow.